Welcome back to the future of. This is the space for the future curious. I tell you about the technologies, strokes of genius and discontinuities that could go big and shape the way we live tomorrow. In this episode, 5 tantalizing insights that tell us about a future full of possibilities. 1. The director of Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab explains why life in video call is more exhausting than vis-a-vis encounters. 2. A Japanese company launches touchless holograms that you can actually interact with. Touch pandemic sharpens the wit. 3. A group of scientists manage to converse with people who are experiencing lucid dreams. What's the point? Are interactive dreams coming? 4. Satellites and artificial intelligence take the field to fight the scourge of illegal fishing. 5. CalTech suggests using Google's undersea cables to detect earthquakes on the ocean floor and potential tsunamis, and it turns out it works. Are you ready? Then hold on tight, buckle up, ready to go.
Silence, please.
Video call fatigue. In the beginning was Skype. The desire to be able to talk to each other at a distance, seeing and speaking to each other in real time has always been present since we sat in front of a monitor. Then came FaceTime, which brought technology to smartphones. And from there on, the numbers have always grown. We all know that the current pandemic has accelerated the phenomenon exponentially, and the platforms that allow us to do this activity have proliferated. The paradigm of all this is told to us by the numbers of Zoom, which went from 10 million users in December 2019 to over 300 just 5 months later. And that's exactly why the fatigue we feel after an intense day of video calling has been called Zoom fatigue. It will not please the American company to be associated with this concept, but it is clear that the issue is about video chats themselves, whether they are conducted on Zoom, Team, Meet, and you name it. Jeremy Bailenson, founding director of the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford University, has spent more than 2 decades studying the ways in which virtual communication affects individuals, and then wrote an exhaustive editorial explaining why we get tired of it. It all revolves around a kind of nonverbal signal overload that occurs when using virtual platforms, compared to classic in-person interactions. In some ways the concept is counterintuitive. We're in our comfortable homes or otherwise in the office. We don't have to walk around or travel to make a meeting. We can even be in flip-flops and keep a nice cup of tea next to us. It's now willingly accepted to no longer wear a shirt or even a tie, and we're more tired. The first cause of Zoom fatigue suggested by Bailenson is the state of stress caused by prolonged close eye contact. Unlike an in-person meeting, where attendees switch from looking at a speaker to other activities, such as taking notes, on Zoom everyone is staring at everyone all the time. It may seem like a small thing to us, but to our brains it's a commitment, since unless we take the camera away, we're potentially always at the center of someone's gaze, even if we're not the speaker. The second issue is really about the presence of the video factor. The additional mental resources needed to interpret video signals require more cognitive work to communicate. This problem cannot be solved by turning off the video from time to time, but rather by inserting real pauses in the call and forcing ourselves to get up and walk away from the screen. The third insight comes from the fact that during a call, we usually also see ourselves. Somewhere on the screen, large or small, our image is always thrown in our face. And this self-mirroring means that we are constantly evaluating ourselves, every moment, thinking about how we look, our posture, our facial expressions and so on. This too, even if we don't realize it, involves a significant commitment of brain resources. So what? Whenever possible, we use the option of not showing our image to ourselves. To others yes, to us it is better not to. The fourth element comes from the static nature of the video call. I used to get up and stretch my legs during physical meetings, at least when the context allowed it. Now I am actually forced in front of the monitor. In fact, when I'm just talking on the phone for example, thanks to Bluetooth headsets, I can walk around and do other small tasks. There are fewer solutions here, but Bailenson cleverly suggests moving the cam away from our face. If we have more living space, or even this would film the table or the room, we could move more independently. In conclusion, the phenomenon has clear explanations, but we also have some ideas and some cues to mitigate the risk of a fatigament. And so, good call to all.
Touchscreen holograms. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed our daily lives toward increasingly touchless behaviors. We've seen it happen through social distancing, online sales, the proliferation of video calls, increased automation, and in so many other aspects of our public and private lives. In October 2020, researchers in Australia confirmed that the virus responsible for COVID-19 can remain infectious on common surfaces such as glass, stainless steel, and banknotes for as long as 28 days. To address these concerns, Japanese researchers have unveiled an application they call floating pictogram technology. This non-contact interface system is based on a state-of-the-art floating image in the air optical technology. Essentially, this technology projects a light source combined with a specialized mirror to display floating buttons in midair that are bright and highly visible. A spatial sensing technology then detects the 3D position of a finger in the air using an algorithm and generates a high-speed response when the user simulates pressing a button. This allows the interface to function without physically touching any buttons or panels. Even before the pandemic, self-checkout and ATM touchscreens posed a serious problem. A 2018 study by London Metropolitan University had already shown that fast food touchscreens, for example, harbor all sorts of unwanted and potentially harmful bacteria. If we extend the concept to elevator buttons, vending machines, buttons on traffic lights, and all those surfaces we touch without even thinking about it every day during our most common activities, it is clear that the problem exists and is not negligible. Here then is the technology developed by Murakami Corporation, in collaboration with Parity Innovations, who have launched a contactless hologram control system, initially designed for high-tech Japanese toilets, and which has the potential to scale for use in a wide variety of public interfaces. Floating pictogram technology allows users to push hologram-like buttons without physically touching any panels, eliminating the need to come into contact with a surface that may be full of bacteria. It's an approach that's as logically simple as it is useful, particularly in this day and age. During 2022, the Japanese company will begin distributing samples of the technology to companies, charging a periodic fee for its use. The innovation will also be offered to hospitals, which will likely be exempt from paying for the use of the technology, precisely because they are at the forefront of the fight against the pandemic. If these experiments are successful in Japan, it's only a matter of time for a rollout on a global scale. In short, let's resign ourselves. Touching us is becoming a luxury almost susceptible to economic value on its own. I wouldn't be surprised if someone with some sort of electronic vaccine passport started offering paid hugs to those most in need.
Dialogues with dreams. Man has conquered many frontiers. We've gone to the moon, to the bottom of the oceans, we've mapped DNA, begun to explore the brain, but when it comes to dreams, there's still an aura of the arcane and unknown that we consider fascinating. An international team of researchers has been able to hold real-time dialogues with people in the midst of so-called lucid dreams, a phenomenon called interactive dreaming, according to a study published last week in the journal Current Biology. Lucid dreams are dreams in which we are conscious of dreaming. They occur at a time when, while dreaming, something in our consciousness recognizes that what is happening is nothing more than part of a dream. Yet it does not oppose it and lets it flow without leaving the dream state. Participants in the study were able to correctly answer some questions, such as simple math problems, while in the depths of REM sleep, that of rapid eye movement. The research reveals a relatively unexplored channel of communication that may enable a new strategy for empirical exploration of dreams. The dreamers reported hearing the researchers' voices as a kind of intangible narrator, clearly identifying it as something from outside their dream. In fact, only 20% of the 36 people who conducted this test gave correct answers to the researchers' questions, but what is interesting is that they answered the same question correctly several times, showing that the interaction was not random. The topic of lucid dreams was specifically studied to understand why some people are able to have this experience and others less so or not at all. For example, a correlation between the use of video games and disability has been explained. The brain of gamers would be more inclined to accept unreal scenarios, such as those created in the virtual worlds of gaming, and therefore it is as if it were trained. This ability is then brought back to the world of dreams. But very little had been studied of the precise moment in which the dream occurs, and even less had tried to interact with the person asleep at that specific time. Okay, you might say, very fascinating, but what do we do with it now? This is an unusual development, but one that could help scientists gain a new level of understanding of the content and structure of dreams, not to mention opening up new frontiers for technology, entertainment, and even the commercialization of dreams. What's more, the whole mechanism that leads information experienced in the real world to be stored in the brain is not yet fully understood, and then be taken and used together with others to form a dream. Paradoxically, if we were able to artificially store information in our memory, even experiences not really lived, and we were able to recall them during dreams and mix them, the idea of selling a dream as if it were a movie would not be so far-fetched. Obviously we are still very far from these scenarios, but would you inject an artificial lucid dream?
Satellites, fishing and AI. Internationally, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is a major cause of fish stock decline and marine habitat destruction. It is estimated to account for about 30% of all fishing activity worldwide, involving up to 26 million tons of fish caught each year, at a cost to the global economy of more than $23 billion. Illegal fishing occurs both on the high seas and within the 200-mile limits of coastal states, which has a particularly negative impact on coastal populations, making them vulnerable. And it's not easy to control, as more than 4 million boats are estimated to go down to the sea every day worldwide to engage in fishing. Figuring out who's doing things by the book and who's taking advantage is not trivial. In a nutshell, illegal fishing hurts both the environment and regular fishermen, who are deprived of an indispensable asset to make a living in a profession that already has its risks and daily hardships. And yet there are 3 billion people in the world who depend on seafood as their primary source of protein, especially in developing countries. 12% of the world's population depends directly or indirectly on the fishing industry for their livelihood. So much so that as of 2018, combating illegal fishing is one of the goals of the G7, held that year in Canada. And that's really where our story begins. Earlier this year, Fisheries and Oceans Canada launched a pilot program to track dark vessels internationally, working with the Canadian Space Agency and some NGOs in the Bahamas and Costa Rica. These ghost vessels are boats that fish illegally, and in order not to be identified, they turn off their transmitters, which they are obliged to leave on. It's a bit like driving without a license plate to avoid a fine, only in this case either we have a system to detect the signal, or with the naked eye one boat among many does not tell us anything about its practices. And a few days ago a contract was signed with 2 Canadian companies that will use a satellite system to identify dark vessels. The team aims to develop a solution that can recognize vessels fishing illegally, deter and blacklist them, and ultimately prosecute the owners to protect global fisheries and marine ecosystems. The Dark Vessel Detection Program will combine data from multiple satellite missions, combined with space-based radio frequency collection and geospectrum analysis to help locate vessels involved in illegal fishing. Advanced Analytics, a platform that combines multisensor data and expertise in the specific maritime domain, will support the international community in combating this delicate challenge. And if satellites weren't enough, artificial intelligence has also entered the field. A system called OceanMind currently tracks thousands of boats, with the capacity to track millions of them, around the world, gathering data from a wide range of sources, including collision avoidance transponders aboard boats, radar images, satellite images, and cell phone signals. Analyzing these massive datasets, as you can imagine, is beyond the capacity of any one person. OceanMind has developed machine learning algorithms that predict the type of fishing behavior based on the vessel's location and flag suspicious and potentially illegal activities such as fishing too close to shore. This technology counts on being able to manage the map of ships at sea dynamically, almost in real time, and where it detects suspicious behavior it alerts the authorities, whether it's Thailand, or the Galapagos Islands, or any other coastal area. In short, the most modern technologies against the incorrect practice of one of the oldest professions in the world. Another example of tech for good, which we will continue to monitor.
Submarine cables and earthquakes. Whenever man finds a clever way to use things built for other purposes in a different way, I always have a feeling of appreciation. Ingenuity has no boundaries, but in this story we could say it has a lot of depth. Let's start from the problem. Earthquakes that originate at the bottom of the oceans are not easy to detect, but more than anything else, when they happen it is important to understand if the tremors can give rise to tsunamis. And as you know, since the phenomenon can't be stopped, it's crucial to get the information as soon as possible, to alert and evacuate coastal areas at risk. In a new study, a team of CalTech scientists reveals a way to use existing technology in the deep ocean to detect these quakes before they cause damage. The secret to doing so? Your Google search history. Yes, probably in some sense almost all of us have a role, very indirectly to be honest, on this application. The study was published Thursday in the journal Science, and shows how Google's Curie telecommunications cables, which run from California to Chile, can be used to detect small perturbations in the polarized light used to transport information along these cables. These perturbations are correlated with quakes on the seafloor. Current approaches to deep-sea seismic monitoring, such as the Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis, DART, buoys used to detect tsunamis, are significantly expensive, and upgrading them is obviously time-consuming. Conventional underwater geophysical instruments are very expensive to deploy and maintain, especially if they have to operate continuously for a long time. This new approach offers a solution that is already there and can be put to the test immediately, since it takes advantage of the pre-existing and widespread submarine fiber optic cables that have already been deployed for telecommunication purposes. This way, scientists don't need to add any equipment along the cable or at the ends of the fiber. They simply need access to polarization readings that telecom operators are already measuring for cable performance monitoring purposes. The Curie, for example, is an undersea cable that powers Google's services like Gmail, the classic search engine, as well as YouTube and Google Cloud, thanks to 72 TBs of bandwidth carried as far as South America. But why are these cables perfect for the purpose? Because nobody disturbs them, except earthquakes precisely. They are located at great depths in the ocean. The maximum depth of Curie, for example, is over 6,000 meters. The temperatures are fairly regular, and there is little or nothing that disturbs them. Unlike telecommunications cables on land, there is not even the issue of vehicles or traffic that can produce traffic vibrations. As a result, even small earthquake tremors can create a change in light polarization that the team was able to link with seismic activity. Simple, clear, and low cost. In short, the next time you do a Google search, remember this: the physical infrastructure that makes your navigation possible is also protecting us from tsunamis at that moment.
Thanks for listening to the future of, really. You could have listened to the radio, you could have spun a vinyl, you could have put on a cassette, you could have used a stereotype, to know what it was, but instead you preferred the future of. That's what I thank you for, and you still have hundreds of episodes to discover. Victor Hugo wrote, "The future has several names. To the fearful it is impossible, to the faint of heart it is unknown, but to the valiant it is ideal."